Hello, I'm Amy from moonmindology.com, and today I want to look at the chart of Xi Jinping. So we don't have a time of birth for Xi Jinping, unfortunately, but this chart has been rectified using known dates of events that have happened in his life. First off, I have him as a Sagittarius ascendant, which means his chart is ruled by Jupiter. Now that makes somebody who is very interested in working hard and a very hard worker, because that planet goes to the 6th house and it can make him interested in health and healing. Now, one thing we do know is Xi Jinping, his main goal is to uplift China, bring money and get the poor out of being poor. He has done a lot of humanitarian things in order to uplift those people and bring money to them. And the chart ruler in the 6th house makes him interested in humanitarian causes, but there can be health issues and it can take a long time for the career to flourish. But if you know anything about Xi Jinping, he has had a very turbulent time with career, but we'll get onto that in a bit. He has Rahu in the 2nd house. So this can create an inflation of wealth. And we know that he's well off, but in early childhood, it can create a lot of disruption. And because there is a mutual aspect that's quite close between Jupiter and Rahu, this can really blow this out of proportion. And the positive aspect to the 2nd house is really good for his money situation. The problem with having a malefic in the 2nd house is there can be problems with the teeth and with eyesight in some cases. And because it's Rahu and it's a bit obsessive, it can be in the mindset of throw the rules out the door because we just want to make the money. So there can be a tendency towards earning money through illicit means. Venus is in the 5th house and it's at 15 degrees. So if you think about Vladimir Putin last week, he has Venus at 18 degrees of Libra, which is opposite to Xi Jinping's Venus. This is something to bear in mind because this is a positive and connective aspect to one another. So they're involved with each other in some way, shape or form. But if you remember from last week, when I looked at Vladimir Putin, his Venus is in the opposite sign in Libra at 18 degrees. There's some kind of connection playing out. There is a connection. But with Xi Jinping having Venus in his 5th house, he loves children and he's really creative and he really likes art. This is a very romantic character who's indulgent and likes the finer things in life. Also, the 5th house can have connotations to politics as well. And that's what he has always been interested in his whole life. His father was a politician as well. Venus rules the 11th and the 6th houses. So the 6th house is a Dastana house, and when that goes to the 5th, there can be problems with children. And sometimes because the 6th house is to do with work, maybe they're working too much. Also the 11th house. The 11th house can bring obstacles to where it goes. So that can reduce the amount of children. He does only have one child. I don't know a great deal about her. I did some research. I know she went to Harvard and I think she studied psychology. But outside of that, we don't know much about her at all. But I wouldn't be surprised if she was quite artistic. But you have to bear in mind, the 11th house is another political house. So 11th and the 5th. This is a very political combination. And not only that, it's the humanitarian. So he is interested, I would really say, in uplifting the world's children. So he's worried about the generations of tomorrow and he is trying to secure a better China by whatever decisions he chooses to make next. Jupiter in the 6th is very philosophical and it can also give an interest in psychology and the way things work. But also Jupiter, as it's a positive, great benefic in the 6th, this can protect him from enemies. This is why Xi Jinping is pretty much unstoppable, because whenever an enemy comes up, doesn't touch him, because he has the protection from Jupiter. Not only that, Jupiter aspects the house it owns, his first house. That's him. That's great for his health, for his reputation. This is a fantastic combination for being unstoppable. However, fourth ruler in the sixth, that can create problems, like an illness with the mother or just problems with the mother. Now let's look at the seventh house. Xi Jinping's seventh house has a stellium. And the seventh house is all about business partners and marital partners. With the sun here, his wives, because he's on his second wife, can be overbearing and they can be very successful and do very well. His current wife, I believe she's some kind of pop star. She is going to be bright and she may even be a diva. The sun can also be really good for his business affairs and really give him some talent with sales, especially being in Gemini as well. And it's great for communication. And he can communicate and express himself in an authoritative fashion. Ruler of the ninth and the seventh, there can be gains from the partner, but also there can be an attraction to business which the father was in. And of course, his father was a politician, so there may be a little bit of him walking in his father's footsteps to finish unfinished business. With the sun conjunct Mars, this can make him very bold and very fiery as an individual, but it can also give a bad temper, somebody who rises to anger quite quickly, but it's also very competitive and very courageous as well. Mars in the seventh is Kuj dosha, which means it can create problems in relationship, and it creates a lot of anger and fighting and passion, but it's essentially it's karma for treating somebody badly in a relationship in the last life. And a lot of people do have it, but it's the sort of thing where you just have to be older when you marry. Of course, he married the first time when he was quite young, so I imagine there was a lot of arguments and whatnot. But you make better decisions when you are older than 30 when it comes to romantic relationships. I always say to people, wait until you're over 30 to get married because we can make mistakes if we do that earlier, because we don't truly know who we are until we get to our 30s. So the antidote for that is to marry somebody who also is Kuja dosha. So I wouldn't be surprised if his current wife also has a similar thing. So the ruler of the 12th is in the 7th, which can create divorce, and he did have a divorce, so there can be problems in relationship. He may still have problems in his current relationship, but it seems to be lasting better. But also the ruler of the 5th is in the 7th. Now that gives a very creative relationship, and as I said earlier, his wife is a performer of some kind, so that is playing into his life perfectly. A talented and successful partner, especially with Mercury in its own sign in Gemini. That's great for communications as well, great for business communications. He is undoubtedly a very expressive and talkative person. It also means that the spouse is well travelled and very youthful in appearance. I mean, to be a performer, you have to look good and you have to be able to communicate effectively. So she ticks all the boxes here. The ruler of the 7th in the 7th, well, this is great for marriage and it's also great for business partners. But Mercury also rules the 10th house. So there can be gains in the career and careers linked to their partner. Mercury is quite closely conjunct Uranus, which gives a unique and eccentric talking style. And also Mercury is the thinking mind and intelligence. So this is a genius mindset. They can be stubborn, but they're into technology, as well as being able to overcome problems other people might be stumped at. This is great intelligence. But not only that, Mars and Mercury are sitting next to each other. This is so good for people who win debates, who win arguments, and this is a great lawyer aspect. So this combination, it's the thinking mind and the intelligence all wrapped into those two together. So he's good at overcoming problems. He's very, very, very intelligent, especially with Uranus there. With Uranus in the 7th, that creates an attraction to eccentric marital partners, as well as unusual businesses, because there's obviously so much going on here that he's very interested in business. But it could also be modern technology. And I am pretty sure he has engaged with technology in China to try and pull more in, because he knows that it makes money. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has some kind of shares or owns some kind of technology company, either now, before, or in the future. Now we're in the most interesting house, the 8th house. So he has Ketu in the 8th. There's somebody else who has Ketu in the 8th, and it was Vladimir Putin from last week. And he also has Pluto in the Gandanta position in Cancer. Their lives and their power is intertwined in some way. And also, Xi Jinping has the karmic knot of Pluto, of power, but this time it's in the 8th house, which is the house of power. It's the house of scandals. It's the house of accidents, secrets, but also charm. It deals with research and transformation. So to have Pluto there can sometimes be quite destructive. With him being in such a great position of power, that can be somewhat concerning, but it can create interesting opportunities throughout that person's life for phenomenal transformations. So let's go, for example, his father, as I said, was a politician, and he fell out of favour with the CCP, which in turn meant that he was disgraced. And I think his father was arrested. I can't remember exactly. But Xi Jinping ended up going to a work camp, which was where he got his experience working with, the normal people in society. The negative side of this is it could be problematic with that obsessive controlling mentality. But the positive side is, has Xi Jinping had enough experience to actually do the right thing when the time comes? I mean, he's very philanthropic, but you hear a lot of mixed things about him. Some people say he's terrible. Some people say he's great. I don't know. He has Ketu in the 8th, which is very introspective, but it can also create near-death experiences. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's had a few of those in his life. Ketu is conjunct very closely to the moon, which means that there can be some kind of separation from the mother. And from what I know, there's not a great deal of information, but I think she was away a lot. She was a politician as well. And of course, everything's in the 8th house, so that's secrets. So he does have secrets. I assure you, he does have secrets. But with the moon in the 8th house, it makes somebody very sensitive, introspective, and intuitive. And it can be really good for people who are interested in psychology, because the moon is the mind. But the fact that the moon is in the 8th house, that alone is a sure sign that the mother's life could have been quite difficult and things weren't so rosy with her in the relationship, and there was a problem. There can also be an interest in sciences and the likes. Because it's close to K2, you'd kind of think, well, maybe it's pharmaceuticals. So he did a chemical engineering degree at Tsinghua University. I don't know if I'm saying that right. He also has the ruler of the 8th in the 8th. And so this is a big sign that there is deep psychological interest. Again, his daughter studies psychology, so I wouldn't be surprised if she's good at it, because he's taught her everything, because he's seen so many different times, different aspects of life and people. Also gives an amazing skill with things like other people's money and banking and insurances, so he would do well out of that. If he has divorces, he does well out of those too. And there could be some psychic abilities. Another sign that there was problems with his mother is Moon and Pluto conjunct. I mean, that's a sure sign that domineering mother. Very domineering, very powerful, very over the top. But Xi Jinping himself as he may have experienced a lot of trauma from his own mother, that can also give a sense of insecurity throughout life. So this is why people go for the power. They look for the power to try and have a sense of safety. They want control so they can control the things that were out of control for them. But due to the fact that the moon is in its own sign, is quite happy in that position, I think there was some kind of repair later on in life with Xi Jinping's mother. So the only reason that that was possible is because the moon is in such good dignity and it allowed for that repair. Pluto moon can give some OCD qualities, but I think because the moon is in that good position, it doesn't make it as concerning as if the moon was in the 8th in, say, Scorpio. Maybe the fearful part of Pluto being at that point in that place with the karmic knot, maybe he will be more sound of mind than to, let someone use the nuclear codes. Now, if we look at the 10th house, Neptune's there, exactly conjunct Saturn. That's very interesting. So Neptune can symbolize an unusual career, and it can also be a link to foreigners in some cases, especially when you've got Saturn there. But it can also be quite scandalous, and I'm pretty sure there are quite a few scandals around Xi Jinping that are always going, but as I said, because the Jupiter in the 6th doesn't touch him, it doesn't affect his career. With Neptune in the 10th, there can be a very unusual career, and usually it's something you would see with somebody who maybe works in Hollywood or with photography or things that are not all as they seem, even nightclubs and the likes. But it can also touch on a link to foreigners, or even it can be linked to scandal. And if you look, Saturn and Neptune are right next to each other. Well, Saturn rules coal and Neptune rules liquids and oil. So when you put these two together, especially at the same degree, this is really, really powerful. For I would have said, if I'd looked at this person, not known who he was, work in coal and oil. Because Xi Jinping is so hell-bent, I believe, looking at this chart, he is so hell-bent on really bringing China up, and I think he's got a good chance of doing it. He could really own the oil agricultural industry. He could do a lot with coal and oil. I'm not sure whether China has access to those kind of materials, but I think he's going to own all the business. I mean, interestingly, we've got a lot of people, especially in the UK, they're saying, oh, for the environment, just stop oil, which isn't as simple as that. Unfortunately, you can't just turn it off. But there is a real push in the direction of going towards electric. But we can't actually just do that. That's not possible. Oil is used in, all kinds of things, even medication, to manufacturing of the most basic things that you could use. And even wind turbines require oil in order to keep going. So to just stop oil isn't a viable thing. But if we start looking like we're going towards electricity and people start to really invest in that, that leaves the oil industry open to somebody else, as we can see. And of course, joke's kind of on us, because as we're investing all of our money into the electrical energy industry, where do all the batteries come from? Mercury conjunct Uranus. They're all from China. So he has his hands in the technological industry, and it looks like he's going to absolutely dominate in the oil industry. Energy rules this world. The only other alternative is nuclear, and it really does seem that they have a karmic tie with that as well. So take that as you will. On to Saturn in the 10th. Well, this is a hard worker and is a leader. Saturn in the 10th is a leader and a government worker, but it can also tie to people who work in agriculture, which when he went on his work camp, where did he work? What did he do? It was agricultural, it was labor. Saturn also aspects Mercury, which can give a somber aspect to the thought process, but also make somebody worry. But it does give a great memory and the ability to speak quite diplomatically. It also gives great concentration and patience. One thing I really do want to point out and drive home to you is the fact that Xi Jinping's chart lines up very obviously with the USA chart. The USA chart is in the dasha of Rahu and Mercury, and both of those planets are in the 8th house. So there could be something scandalous, there could be something transformational, and there could be some kind of death. With a Pluto return, America may never be the same after April 2024, but I could be wrong on that one. But I do have a feeling things will never be the same. And looking at the way things are going, it does seem to support that the balance of power is changing significantly. I also find it very interesting that if you look at the USA chart, not only is the ascendant the same, but also Saturn and Neptune are in the 10th house in Virgo. Jupiter is currently in Aries. It's just gone into that sign this month, and it's creeping closer to his Venus, but also aspects his ascendant. If I have the ascendant correct as 27 degrees of Sagittarius, then that means in April 2024, when there's going to be the final Pluto return in the USA chart, that is when Jupiter and Uranus conjunct at 27 degrees and will be aspecting his ascendant to the degree. This is going to be really powerful for him because Jupiter is a good planet for him. Jupiter is going to be going into Xi Jinping's 6th house in May 2024. And in that position, it's going to be great because that's really going to support the people who work for him and mean that they are going to be on his side. So he's not going to have the same problem as Vladimir Putin is going to have with people that work for him and serve him. Saturn is currently in Xi Jinping's 3rd house, and it will be there for the next 2.5 years. So 3rd house is all about siblings and your peers. So it's going to be countries that are connected to and right next to China. Saturn is going to be good for discipline and order during this time, and it's good for stability. However, there can be some problems with short distance travel, maybe intercity travel or education in China. There could be problems with that may come up during this time. Neptune is in the 4th house and will be for quite some time. So that could be a case of scandals in the homeland. But there could also be problems with drugs in China as well, because the 4th house is happiness. And when you start to put something as scandalous and is out of this world as Neptune, people could feel confused and slightly unhappy and then use mind-altering substances in order to feel better. So there could be problems with drugs during the next 14 years. But USA is also undergoing this transit as well. So you may see a similar problem in both countries. Pluto is also going to be transiting through the 2nd house of Xi Jinping's chart, but it's going to be crossing over Rahu. And this is going to be after the Pluto return for the USA. And Rahu expands. So this could expand power for Xi Jinping, and especially monetary power. The American stock market could fall, but the Chinese stock market could get a foothold in global affairs and become something more important to the rest of the world. I hope you've enjoyed my video today. Don't forget, if you want a reading, just go to moonmindology.com and you can organise a reading with me. If you like my videos, like, subscribe to see more. But thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.